In order to see how Rakugo shows skill level with direction, we're going to look at Kikuhiku's first performance and the performance where he finds his own Rakugo. And already from the start, as Kiku walks in, we can already see how nervous he is due to the shaky like camera movement as he's going towards the stage and the bead of sweat falling down. The series then goes to further to show that he's really only performing in front of a small group of people, which makes sense considering this is his first performance. And the shot to his shaking eyes and hands really only go to further exemplify how nervous he is. Then a long shot is used to exemplify how stiff he is. Now, we're given something to measure this by, as in the first episode, given with Yotaro's performance, he's dynamic and full of energy, and the camera constantly cuts back and forth as he portrays different characters. And it's the opposite here, as the series uses a long shot and a combination of close ups to show how stiff and rigid he is in his acting. This is also coupled with very good voice acting, as if you listen to the line, it shows he's not speaking naturally or imitating a natural flow of conversation.
に大きくしちまうやつがあるかい。じゃあ出来たてはアンパンみたいだね。おい。
As he's speaking pretty quickly and cuts back and forth. He's speaking pretty quickly, unlike Yotaro, whose flow of conversation was pretty natural in the first episode. And something that a lot of people praise the graphic novel Watchmen for, written by Alan Moore, is its use of visual irony, as the lines and the image in the panels always more or less coincides with each other, and something is happening here. Like the character in the story, Kikuhiku is speaking too quickly. We have another really good shot of visual irony here as well, as here Yakumo is positioned kind of like he's looking out of an open door, and that the door should be closed given how bad Kikuhiku's performance is, and the dialogue also goes to show that as well. Then we kind of get to why the story was chosen as Kikuhiku's first performance, as like all the performances in Rakugo, it always relates to the situation or the characters and themes itself. And here the honor child is Kikuhiku, and Yakumo, like the character in the story, is having a hard time praising him, especially compared to Sukeroku. And then another great close-ups are used to show his frustration. And I like how the scene ends in a long shot, panning further back with the music playing in the background to kind of highlight his inferiority complex compared to Sukeroku.
いくつって生まれたばかりだから一つに決まってるだろう。一つと。
And just from this first performance alone, we can already see how new and unskilled Kikuhiku is, especially when you compare it to Sukeroku's performance afterwards. And I think the scene does a good job in getting the viewer uncomfortable while listening to Kikuhiku through its great use of direction alone. And to my knowledge, this scene is actually absent from the manga and our anime original scene, which is really good as it gives a lot of context into Kikuhiku's journey to become where he is. And unlike other shows such as Food Wars and stuff that just kind of adapt the manga one to one, Rakugo understands the fast pace of the manga and adds or extends scenes here and there to fully flesh out the story into anime. Now, when we compare this to Kikuhiku's performance where he finds his own Rakugo, we get two very different stories. And before he starts the performance, we see Kikuhiku flap his fan, which is pretty telling as wind is used as a symbol for change in Rakugo, and that fits here given how his performance will turn out. And unlike before, we see Kikuhiku is graceful and confident as he walks in, and we know this as through the direction alone, as unlike before where the camera was shaky as he walks in, here it's graceful and eases in very smoothly. Then, as Kikuhiku eases into his performance, we get another shot of visual irony as Kikuhiku takes off his kimono, similarly to the character in the story. And we can see him shuffle his feet in, indicating that he's easing into his role. And already from just the direction alone, we can tell how where Kiku is and what his state of mind is compared to what it was before. And as he starts the performance, we can see how his voice changes, and it shows as he's more confident, as he's not fumbling and his speech isn't as quick. He's not speaking as quickly as he was before. The characters he's portraying are more fleshed out, and overall, we can just from an auditory level, we can see how much he's changed.
どうしようかね。真珠相手って言ったって、どの人選んでもかわいそうだしね。あら、いた。一人もの本屋の金蔵さん。
Then, as he further eases into his performance, the lamp lights up, indicating a kind of aha moment as he realizes that the Rakugo he's performing is for himself. This is later supported by the shot of total darkness and the inner dialogue that comes along with it. And just through direction alone, we can already see how Rakugo relates information to the viewer without any use of dialogue. And this is continued as we get an overhead shot of him separated from the crowd as he's performing his Rakugo, further showing how this Rakugo is for himself and himself alone. As the performance goes on, the series uses different shots to show Kikuhiku portraying the characters, which starkly contrasts the performance before, which uses a long shot to emphasize his lack of skill. And one thing I'd like to highlight is Rakugo's smart use of audience shots. They show the audience shots when Kikuhiku is narrating, which allows us to not really miss a beat while seeing their reaction to the story. And another thing is that the transition between the story and Kikuhiku is really well done, as not only does this show how his own Rakugo style, it shows how skilled he is compared to his performance before, and especially when you compare it to Sukeroku, who involves the audience more than Kikuhiku, who kind of through skill alone performs the Rakugo for himself and expresses himself in the story. And just from direction alone, we can already see the two different styles of Sukeroku and Kikuhiku, while showing Kikuhiku's difference in skill level from the first performance. Now, then it ends in a long shot, similarly to the performance before, but unlike that performance, Kikuhiku, we can see him vibrantly acting out the characters in the story compared to how stiff and rigid he was in the first performance. And overall, just from direction and the directional techniques used alone, we can already see how much Kikuhiku has improved without the story really needing to say anything. And we know this just from the excellent use of direction, which I think a lot of series or a lot of people tend to leave out when they when they review or watch a show, as it's something that really is kind of in the background. Now, if I were to edit the same scene from the anime exactly how Food Wars would have done it, it would look something like this.
どうも。本日はいっぱいのお運び、御礼申し上げ。品川の新宿に白木屋というお座敷がありまして、そこに板頭を務めるお染という花魁がおりました。このお染も夜年並みにはかなわない。移り替えの着物を買ってくれる客もおらず、こんな悔しい思いをするんなら、いっそ誰かと心中しようと。どうしようかね。心中相手って言ったって、どの人選んでもかわいそうだしね。あら、いた。一人もの本屋の金蔵さん。
反応が違う。
金さん、よく来てくれたね。嬉しいわ。少しばっかり相談したいことがあんの。よし、心得た。 どんな相談でも引き受けるぜ。ほんと？まあ嬉しい。そう言ってくれんの金さんだけ。ああ、わかった。てめえの居場所をこさえるため、ここにいても大丈夫だと思うため、自分が自分でいるため。
Notice how much of the story is lost with this edit. And this comparison wouldn't even be possible with the first performance since, well, it doesn't exist in the manga at all. And while you could argue the direction of Food Wars doesn't have much effect on the story or narrative itself, I heavily disagree, as a good sense of direction tells the story within itself. Food Wars really eliminates this possibility with the way it's directed. In addition, it comes at the cost of pacing. Take, for example, Kikuhiku's Rakugo scene where he finds his own Rakugo, which, as well, a 9-minute scene gets reduced to 1 minute, which comes at a huge cost, as this in turn causes a lot of scenes down the line to not have as much impact as he did before, due to the loss of foreshadowing and motifs introduced in the performance. An example would be the conversation between Yakumo and Konatsu in Season 2, Episode 10. The loss of the motif of water and the track associated with it would have caused the scene not to hit quite as hard as it should have, and the meaning wouldn't have been there. The original scene also takes advantage of the anime medium as it uses unique shot selection and great voice acting to enhance the performance instead of an over-reliance on pan shots like Food Wars. Take the scene where Erina finds the identity of Soma's dad. It has roughly the same page to time ratio as my edit, but slightly faster. It doesn't work quite as well as the manga due to the way it's presented visually. The scene works in the manga due to its visual format, as leading up to the review, the panels are drawn tightly without much room leading up to the 2-page spread, which break the tightness of the panel, showing off the review and driving home the impact. What does the anime do? After a minute of literally pan shots, the reveal ends up being another pan shot, but this time it moves around sporadically, which comes off as incredibly lazy, in my opinion. This becomes even worse as the series goes on, as multiple moments are ruined, such as the Starry Night scene, which doesn't even do anything different, and subjects the spread to another pan shot, but this time, nothing else. At least the reveal moved the camera a bit. Unlike Food Wars, Rakugo takes use of the anime medium to add more visual and auditory motifs, further enhancing and exploring the story's themes.